This is Mrs. K showing you the way. This is 10.1 Notes Evaluating at Quadrantal Angles. So here, if the terminal side of the angle lies on an axis, so it's 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180 degrees, 270, 360, 450. If it lands on an axis, it's called quadrantal. Okay, it helps to think about a point that would be on each axis, remembering that the unit circle has a radius of 1. Okay, so if you are at 0 degrees, 90 degrees, 180, 270. This is also 360. This is also 450. You know how to get those angles. Plus 90 is 540. You could also say this one is negative 90 degrees. You can go backwards. Negative 180 degrees. Okay? So if you think about points that would be there, if the unit circle has a radius of 1 unit, okay, that means this radius is 1. So a point over here would be 1, 0. I'm going right and then nowhere. A point up here would be 0, 1. Going nowhere and then them going up. Here would be left, negative 1, 0. Down here, nowhere, 0, negative 1. And then you just figure out which angle you're looking at, and I'll show you how to get opposite and adjacent here. So if you think about it, if you started drawing triangles in here, the opposite is always vertical, since your right angle is on the x-axis. And if you think, that's the y value. So the y value is always your opposite. And then your adjacent is always the x value. Let's see if I can get it. So adjacent is your x. And then your hypotenuse, if you think about that one, that's just the radius of the circle. So your hypotenuse is 1, always 1. If you're doing quadrantal or any of them, the radius is 1. Those other ones, it's just the ratios of the sides. You're not actually using the radius. But here we're going to use the radius, and that's your hypotenuse. All 4 of them. Hypotenuse, 1. Hypotenuse, 1. Hypotenuse, 1. So like down here, if I wanted the sine of pi, we know that pi is 180 degrees. Well, 180 is right there. So it doesn't really make an angle. Okay, so in this case, that's where you figure out what the point is. So right here, you're going left, negative 1, 0. What's the hypotenuse? 1. All 4 of those axis angles, the hypotenuse is 1. Your opposite is vertical. That's your 0. It doesn't have an opposite because you don't have a triangle. Your adjacent is negative 1. Okay, and then if you remember, sine of an angle is opposite over hypotenuse. So then we just put 0 over 1, or 0. Tangent, pi over 2. Well, what's pi over 2? Multiply by 180 over pi. 180 divided by 2 is 90. So we're doing the tangent of 90 degrees. Where's 90 degrees? Right here. Get that point. So if you were plotting it, 0, 1. Hypotenuse, 1. The x value is always the adjacent. The y value is always the opposite. We know that the ratio for tangent is opposite over adjacent. So we're just going to put 1 over adjacent 0. Okay, we know that we can't divide by 0. If we type it into the calculator, it gives us an error. So what we put here is this is just called undefined. So when we get to graphing, you'll actually have an asymptote on the tangent graph because it's undefined at certain places. All right, got 2 more. So cosecant of negative 2 pi. Negative 2 pi times 180 over pi. Negative 360 degrees. That just goes clockwise, but you end up the same spot right here. And your point there is positive 1, 0. Remember, the hypotenuse for all of the quadrantal angles is 1. X value, adjacent, adjacent, always adjacent. Y value, always opposite. Remember, cosecant is the reciprocal of sine. So if sine is opposite over hypotenuse, then cosecant is hypotenuse over opposite. So we're going to do 1 over 0. Undefined. What if it's 0 over 1? Well, then it's just 0. We did that right up here. Okay. How about cotangent of negative pi over 2? Well, what's negative pi over 2? You'll get used to doing these, but that's negative 90 degrees. So we're going to do cotangent negative 90 degrees. So right down here. What is that point? 0, negative 1. What's the hypotenuse? Every quadrantal angle has a radius or hypotenuse of 1. Technically, it's not a hypotenuse because you don't have a triangle. Opposite, y value. Adjacent, x value. Cotangent is the reciprocal of tangent. So if tangent is opposite over adjacent, then cotangent is adjacent over opposite. So then we're going to put 0 over negative 1. Which is 0. That concludes the lesson on evaluating a trig function at a quadrantal angle.